everyone. This is David Arlett from Gen Xer Reacts, and I am going to talk to you about Mr. Thomas Crooks, the gentleman who took a shot at former President Trump on the campaign trail. Now, I'm not going to sit here and talk about the case specifically, so we don't have all the facts. And by the way, it's July 15th, 5:20 p.m. as I'm recording this. Other facts may come out that may negate whatever I say, but I'm not going to talk about the specifics of the case. What I'm going to talk about is what Mr. Crooks evidently had to endure as far as when he went to school at Bethel Park High School. And I'm going to link this USA Today article so that you can read it yourself. He was evidently bullied almost every day, according to Jason Kohler. Kids picked on Crooks for wearing camouflage to class and his quiet demeanor. Really? You have nothing better to do as kids than to tease some kid because he's wearing camouflage and doesn't like to talk very much. Now, I'm going to let you guys in on a little ancient secret. I, too, was bullied in high school. I went to high school, started off in Anchorage, Alaska, then 2 years in Portland, Oregon, and I finished out in a town called Federal Way, Washington. But while I was in Alaska and Portland especially, I was bullied constantly. We didn't have words for it back then, but we now know what it is. It's because I was gay. But back then it was my attitude, because I was quiet and shy, believe it or not, and also because I just had no fashion sense whatsoever. I was about the only gay on planet Earth who couldn't mix and match to clothes to save his life. And it was constant. There was one guy who was especially bad, and if you are being bullied, number one, speak up, speak out, speak often. And also, I'm going to tell you guys a little secret. If you're being bullied, the best revenge is not to take a submachine gun and go and try and take down everybody who's ever wronged you. Your best bet and your most satisfying way is to outlive your tormentors. And I'll explain what I mean. There was a guy who was a year ahead of me. He was class of 89. It was class of 1990, if I haven't mentioned it already. His name was Jay Poss, P-O-S-S. Now, before you worry about me being sued or anything, I'm going to let you know the guy that bullied me and did most of the tormenting, about 90% of it, he's been unalive for many decades now. And I'm 52. I graduated in 1990, as I've said before. And Mr. Poss passed away in 2002. I'll let you know, when I was going to school, it was a constant litany from him. Just absolutely some of the most foulest stuff that would come out of his mouth. And it wasn't just me. Another thing he did, because we had one class together, it was choir class, but he would go to the girls in class. And our teacher was often in her office because she had to arrange, and this is in the days before computers, text messaging and stuff, that some of the elite choir that she had, called swing choir, would tour Europe every other year. And so she would have to make travel arrangements and all of that stuff. So she was constantly on the phone in her office. And so we were kids left to basically mill around. At least 50% of the time, we had no class. We just milled around. And that's the best fertile ground for a bully to operate. Because he was older than me, my voice developed early, plus I was had a 4-octave range as a baritone, was quite talented, and I had a loud voice, as you can tell, that could carry to the back of an auditorium without even needing to be microphoned. So choir teachers loved me. But our choir teacher back then, Betty Fedge, she has long since passed away. She was basically, at this point, she was burnt out, and so she really just didn't care what happened in class. And whenever I would complain to her or any of the other teachers about Jay, there was a constant litany of excuses from them. And I'm sure that this poor kid, Crooks, got the same excuses too. It was before class. It was after class. I didn't hear it. I didn't see it. It was, off school grounds. And the excuses were it was just a roundabout. I talked to him, and he said he wouldn't do it anymore. And the very next day he was doing it, and it was just multiple times. And after a while of complaining, I just shut down and just said, okay, if they're not going to do anything, I'm just, what the hell? Why bother, sticking my head up if it's going to get like whack-a-mole and get whacked every time? And I'm sure that's probably why this kid had a quiet demeanor after a while. It's because he was constantly being bullied. And so his defense mechanism was like a little turtle, just crawl into your shell and hide. What the teacher should have done, and now knowing what I know, and to any of you kids who might be listening in on this, is go to the vice principal. And then if the vice principal doesn't help, go to the principal. And if that doesn't work, get your parents to help you go to the school administration, the district administrators, and get them. Do whatever it is you have to do, but don't suffer in silence by yourself. And it was ironic, too, because it wasn't just mean, but like in choir class, he would go up to girls and he would find girls who had their bras done up front. And so he would grab them by their bras and would pull their bras out and then let it go and snap it. And I didn't know a bra could stretch this way, but they can't. Not very well, mind you, but it would it would make a sickening snap, and these poor girls were howling in pain, number one, but number two, in utter humiliation. Because then everybody else was like, that's so, and of course the girls were fighting mad, but the guys would be all snickering over in the corner because we were young and stupid back then. And the teacher would, what happened? Well, Jay snapped the girl's bra again. Jay, go to the principal's office. And he'd go to the principal's office and he'd get a couple of days of after-school detention, and he was back at it again. Instead of what the teacher should have done is gone to him and said, look, if I get another complaint about you tormenting another student, bullying another student, and if you snap another girl's bra, you are off the tour schedule. You are never going to be in swing choir, and you will never go tour Europe as long as I'm here as the instructor. Did she bother to do that? No, never did. A few years later, I went to, when I got transferred to Portland, Oregon. I had an instructor named Molly, and I'll just use her first name because she is still with us, thank goodness. One of the most talented instructors I've ever had. Absolutely phenomenal. Sadly, only had her for 1 year before budget cuts took hold. But after a couple months of watching the teasing and all of that stuff, and I was chased home from school, at least 2 or 3 times they would flash guns at me that they were going to shoot me. Because, being gay and all that stuff. But there was one kid in choir class who was the ringleader, that usually is. And one day I had strep throat. I had 103 fever. The doctor said, stay home, here's some antibiotics. Rest up. I get a call from Molly. And she's like, David, the principal has called a surprise assembly. He wants the choir to sing a couple of songs. Now, of course, I was the only kid in this choir who could carry a tune as far as the males were concerned. And so I'm like, Molly, I've got 103 fever and I've got strep throat. She goes, David, just come here, sing 2 songs. I will have someone drive you home, but we need you here. And I said, okay, let me call my mom and make sure it's okay with her, and I'll just come sing 2 songs and be done. Okay, fine. So as I was doing this, she goes to the choir and she says, I called David. He's out with strep throat. He will come in, but I'm not sure if he's going to get here in time. And she said the other guys were freaking out of like, we can't do this without David. He's the only one who can carry a tune. And so she went up to the chief guy that was my tormentor, and she looked at him and she said, why don't you think about that the next time you start teasing him? And she said, you could have dropped a pin and it would have sounded like a horn blaring off. And they were like, oh, okay. And I can tell you right now, the teasing got cut by more than half. You know, I was still teased in my other classes and after school, but that's another story for another day. Then I went off, and even before, to jump back to my high school days up in Alaska, Jay was he was so awful. He would go after members of the swim team because they're long and skinny, lanky bodies. They're not fighters, and so he thought, I'm pretty muscular. I can take them on, so I'll just go torment them too. And so he would go after them. And about 2 weeks before I left Alaska, his sister came into my English class to return a pair of scissors. And what happened was he had messed around with so many members of the swim team that the seniors, before they graduated on the swim team, all ganged up together, threw him up against his locker and duct taped him to his locker with several rolls of duct tape. And I went out as, they were cleaning everything up and stuff, and I got a hold of some of the notes they had duct taped to his body. And they were not, it was like, as soon as you turn 18, we're going to come back and find you and we're going to beat the crap out of you kind of stuff. Did the teachers bother to intervene? Not as far as I know. And it was interesting though, but many years later when I went to nursing school in Tacoma, Washington, one of my former classmates from up in Alaska ended up going to the same nursing school. Because she turns around, our first day of orientation, she goes, I know you. And I'm like, yeah, I remember you. I said, your name is Beth, and you're from Anchorage, Alaska. And she goes, yeah. And I said, we had choir class together. She goes, oh, yeah. She goes, you're the guy that could really sing well. She goes, And I said, well, whatever happened to Jay Poss? And she rolled her eyes at me. She goes, oh, him. And I said, well, what do you mean, oh, him? I said, he was always making fun of me because he said the girls liked talking to him. And she goes, no, actually, we liked talking to you better because you were a genuinely nice person. The only reason we talked to Jay was to get him to shut up and leave us alone. The year after we graduated, in 91, I guess Jay was one of those, it's called biathlon, where they ski, then shoot clay pigeons, ski, shoot clay pigeons. He was supposedly going down and got caught up in an avalanche in 1991 and was injured pretty badly. And his doctors and therapists and everybody all told him to quit. And I'm like, well, that's not going to work. And sure enough, I read further on in the news article, he refused to quit. And so as he was turned 30, he thought he's going to, be an Olympian or something like that. I don't know. Had, I guess, just gotten married, and his wife was pregnant with their first child. And he went skiing with two of his buddies in the middle of British Columbia. And I'm like, why on earth are you doing that? Because he had entered a competition, and he scored 37th place. And so he was going to try and up his bidding so he could get it. I'm like, 37th place, and you're injured. That should be your first clue. You need to quit downhill skiing and go and get a JOB so you can support your WIFE and your BABY. But not Jay the Magnificent. So He went with two of his buddies into British Columbia and got caught up in the second avalanche. And I guess they got to his two buddies right away, but they couldn't get to him for quite some time, I guess at least 2 or 3 days. He was buried alive in the snow, and he died in 2002. And it's been 22 years as of me recording this, and I can say that every single day that I wake up, I just think to myself, yeah, you know what? I outlived that son of a bitch by 2 decades and counting now. And every day is just that much sweeter, knowing that I've outlived my biggest enemy on earth. And I didn't have to get violent. I didn't have to embarrass myself or torment my family like this poor kid's family is going to be tormented for the rest of their lives, trying to pick up and explain to people what their kid did and why. And now why at least 2 other people, I guess, 1 or 2 other people have been killed because of his actions, who had nothing to do with nothing but being at the wrong place at the wrong time. So if you are one of those kids who is being bullied and tormented in school, please speak up, speak out, and keep fighting the good fight. But live fighting the good fight. Don't end up taking your own life through something stupid. And if you're a teacher or a principal or a school administrator, for the love of God, stop these bullies. Stop the bullying. Stop the excuses, the runaround, and everything else. And give these kids that are doing the bullying, give them some hard consequences for their actions. Do it now, before they get caught up in an avalanche and get buried alive for 3 days while their wife and their unborn baby are terrified, wondering what the hell's going on. At any rate, if you've been bullied, go ahead and comment it down below. Or if you know of any resources for kids or adults or anybody else who has been bullied, go ahead and put it in the comments below. And I hope to see you guys on better days.